Let your curiosity rise.
Mad Bricks webcast,
Where the human spirit flies. Mad Bricks webcast. Where the human spirit flies.
Hey, welcome to the Medbix webcast. This is Ramana Annam Raju. I'm the host. My co-host is missing. Maybe she got busy in hospital. She is running. So we have to do it by ourselves now. Looks like. But anyway, welcome. I have a very interesting guest, Dr. Eben Alexander. He had a very interesting story. Uh, that he's going to tell us a little bit about it, and then we are going to clear up all these noise Silicon Valley making right now. Okay, Silicon Valley is doing something they think is different, about consciousness, about the achievement, things that they can achieve through the AI and all those things. It's a very different world we are in. So when I spoke with the last time, it's very different. He was one of the initial guests for my podcast. Thanks to him. Let me bring him to the table. Welcome, Dr. Alexander.
Have me back on.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to the Medbix. You are one of the initial guests for me and supported me at that time. Nobody was watching. Now we have thousands of people are watching. That's a big difference.
I'm glad
Dr.
you're
Alexander,
sharing your work.
Yeah, you look good. You look sharp nowadays. Let me ask you a question. We are just tell us a little bit about your story about you are repeating a million times probably, but very short, very brief. If you can repeat your near-death experience a little bit.
Well, I think the important thing to point out, I'd spent 54 years of my life honing a conventional, materialist science worldview. And then I had a wake-up call. It came in the form of a severe case of bacterial meningoencephalitis. It was E. coli. As you know, E. coli meningitis is extremely rare in adults. It almost always happens in newborns. So my doctors had that little shock and spent a week in coma, had a profound journey that, for me, completely awakened the reality of a loving God force at the core of the universe and eternity of our souls in a very profound way. But I had to learn those lessons in an unusual setting. It was one of complete amnesia for my life. And, those who've read the book Proof of Heaven or heard one of my many talks on YouTube and other resources will realize I had 3 levels of kind of journey. It started in a primitive, coarse, unresponsive earthworm eye view realm, but I was led up by a beautiful kind of musical melody of light up into a much higher and richer, more real reality in the Gateway Valley. That's kind of like Plato's world of ideals, but for the individual soul. It's where we would reunite with souls of departed loved ones, go through life reviews. And life reviews are a very important concept to discuss in more detail to realize really where this revolution is headed. And then I had this beautiful guardian angel on a butterfly wing of all experiences that welcomed me in that beautiful Gateway Valley. And she proved to be essential to understanding the reality of the experience based on my discovery of her identity 4 months after my coma with a picture sent in the mail. I won't say more about that here and now, but the bottom line is her identity was absolutely critical to my understanding of the journey. And then all of it, I ascended through that kind of timeless, eternal spiritual realm all the way into what I call the core, an infinite inky blackness, but filled to overflowing with that divine love of that God force. And I came back realizing it's not whether you want to label that as God or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, Tao, all the many words humans have used to try and label that fundamental intelligence that's part of our intelligence at the core of the universe. And so to me, it was a very powerful revelation that, our soul or spirit is eternal, that it has a lot to do with healing and coming to wholeness in this life. And it took me more than 2 months to recover from that coma, from that onslaught. And many of the lessons I learned there, including an ICU psychosis at the last 36 hours after I was intubated, every bit of it contributes to this deeper understanding. And of course, for those who haven't read it, there's a medical case report on my medical records, came out September 2018, Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases. And that case report makes it very clear for anybody with a medical background that that brain was in no shape to harbor any kind of dream or hallucination, much less the most profound kind of spiritual experience of my life. It all happened at a time when modern neuroscience would say my brain was incapable of anything other than being in coma. And then of course, the big question was, how do you explain my miraculous recovery? And that's what the scientific peer review editors of that journal challenged the three authors of my case report. How do you explain this unprecedented recovery, complete recovery over 2 months? How did that happen? Well, they said it's because he had a near death experience. It was that deep spiritual dive that enabled him to come back to this world healed, more whole from having gone through the experience. And that's where I think the big value of my story and of similar stories, the millions of near death experiences that are out there, is so valuable to this world because it shows us we're spiritual beings in a spiritual universe. This thing we call consciousness is in many ways fundamental to the universe at large, and the physical world emerges from it. That's a most important statement. It's not the physical world with the bottom up causality yielding this reality that we witness, but we actually have a tremendous amount of power. And that's where wholeness and healing and placebo effect, spontaneous remissions, and of course, miraculous healing and NDEs can come from. So for me, it was a tremendous eye opener. And I've come to realize in the 17 years since my coma that a huge segment of the scientific community is going along for this incredibly important ride of discovering our true nature and realizing it's not the false sense of separation of materialism, but this new kind of united form of understanding consciousness and our connection with it at large in connection with each other. So it's a beautiful lesson of unification, oneness, and harmony.
Your recovery is definitely a miracle. My brother passed away through the bacterial meningitis in one day. It's the recovery is, they can dispute everything, but recovery cannot be disputed because that is a miracle. No question
Right.
about it.
Well, it
So,
absolutely is. So thank you for pointing that out.
yes. Second, I wanted to ask you, actually, do you know the new studies done on the NDE? Aware 2 by Sam Parnia. The study is validating. This is a class of experiences. These are all you cannot explain through it's a very structured and homogeneous across the world. That is experiences are. So it's kind of giving a lot of validation. Aware 2 study done in ICUs and cardiac arrest situations. Tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Alexander.
Well, I think the thing that I keep seeing repeating is you find that there are certain people taking a materialist approach, brain creates consciousness, and then trying to use that to kind of extrapolate all these human experiences, but it really doesn't work. There's far too much going on there in terms of ongoing connection. That's why it's not just near death experiences, but very related are shared death experiences. These happen in people who are perfectly healthy, who have no problems with oxygen tension or CO2 carbon dioxide buildup in their brain. They're usually a healthcare worker or more likely a loved one of someone who's passing from the physical world. So shared death experiences, and you can go to sharedcrossing.org to learn a lot more in the work of William Peters, because he's actually running courses to help people gain the skills that might enable them to participate in a shared crossing with a loved one who's leaving the physical world. And shared death experiences can even involve witnessing a full-blown life review of that departing soul before the bystander soul comes back to this world. So beginning just with shared death experiences, we realize that the theater of explanation is much grander than just people who are in the process of dying, having active physiologic challenge to their being. And there's also, of course, the beautiful work of Christopher Kerr, Kerr. He wrote a book about 7 or 8 years ago. It's called Death is But a Dream. He's a hospice buffalo, the head of that hospice unit. So all he does is work with dying people.
Yeah.
palliative care, hospice, what have you. And what he finds is the very same thing that you find in the near death community. A lot of people complain, well, the near death experiencer didn't die. I want to know what happens when you die. Well, guess what? Christopher Kerr has confirmed that uniting with souls of departed loved ones in a very convincing and real fashion, not just wishful thinking or hallucinatory encounters, but very real and meaningful connections with souls of departed loved ones, is one of the most ancient ingredients of a near death experience. Gregory Shushan, who's written extensively about NDEs in primitive cultures, harps on the fact that the ultimate nature of them is based on souls of departed loved ones who come there to escort loved ones across. So this kind of theme of connection of souls and soul groups and the binding force of love keeps coming up again and again, and those are the main ingredients of the NDE community. Um, in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, Karen Newell and I point out the consilience, that is, the agreement of multiple kind of widely disparate lines of inquiry, like the hard problem of consciousness in neuroscience, which is solved by realizing that consciousness is fundamental and the brain is a filter that allows in this primordial eddy current of consciousness, but from that primordial mind. Philosophy of mind is another element of this consilience. Philosophy of mind, especially the binding problem, the apparent unity of consciousness in an individual, which is very difficult to explain if you think it's all due to different neuronal nodes of a network that are contributing to this summation of reality. But no, consciousness seems to be unified from the get-go. That's very hard to explain unless you understand that it's coming in unified from the source, from that primordial mind source. And then there's all the evidence in this consilience argument for non-local consciousness, that it's not just all occurring right here and within the confines of my sensory apparatus, but that I can know things at a great distance. I can be telepathically connected with a loved one. Guy Leon Playfair wrote a beautiful book, Twin Telepathy. He's a great investigator in England, and twin telepathy, he estimates 35% of identical twins have very powerful telepathic experiences. And of course, telepathy is not limited to identical twins. It's really people who know each other well. And identical twins have such an overlap in their genetics and their nervous systems that that kind of resonance is very easy to allow communication across time and space. Um, but for example, the day I went into coma, I met my birth family, a year before my coma, very critical in my overall story for people who are familiar with it. And yet we spent about 3 months not communicating. That came to an end November 10th, 2008, the day I went into coma. That day, my birth mother, who I hadn't communicated with in more than 3 months, she came home from a business meeting. She worked as a realtor, and she knew something was badly wrong with me. And so she called the family, found out I'd gone into coma that day with meningitis, might not survive. So yes, that telepathic communication between a son and mother, even though we spent the first 54 years of our life apart, that telepathy was alive and well that day. So this thing we call mind, this kind of interconnection, after death communications, another beautiful example. And then, of course, that gigantic scientific literature on past life memories in children, suggestive of reincarnation. A big example coming out of University of Virginia, where in the last 6 decades, they've studied more than 2,500 cases of past life memories in children claiming reincarnation. And of those 2,500, more than 1,700 have been solved. That is, they actually found the person who lived before. So reincarnation is a very real part of human existence. Although, as Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson, the doctors who ran those studies all those many years at UVA, will tell you, you have to harvest the memories before age 6 or 7. Because after that, natural processes cover them over. So most of us as teenagers and adults don't have ready access to memories of past lives and between lives, and yet scientifically studied, the evidence is there. So in other words, this big consilience picture that I'm painting of consciousness beyond the confines of the brain and the body is where the science is absolutely headed, because all the evidence leads in one direction. It will never lead back to that bleak and paltry fiction of materialism that claims that we're nothing more than our physical bodies, that our thoughts and awareness is nothing more than a side effect of chemical reactions and electron fluxes of stuff in the brain, following all the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, and leaving us with no option for free will. That's basically the fiction of materialist science. And it's not true, it's a complete lie. And likewise, the afterlife is very well established scientifically. If you go to bigelowinstitute.org, start reading those 29 essays written in 2021, all by scientists with at least 5 years of experience in explaining the afterlife question, investigating it, you'll realize that science has moved far beyond a discussion of whether or not the afterlife is real. We're way into the territory of yes, afterlife and reincarnation are very real. Let's explain more of how they work and how they apply in our lives.
Dr. Alexander, I'm in the middle of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley people think that artificial intelligence is showing a lot of reasoning, intelligence, and then other things. So some parts of the double-edged argument they have. One is that AI may be conscious, AI will be conscious in the future. That's one argument. But another argument is the exactly coincides with your idea is that intelligence and consciousness are inner. You don't need a you can be intelligent. You don't need inner experience. AI proves that. AI says that we don't need inner experience. I don't have the fear of death or fear or fear of death or anything survival. So the inner experience is not there for AI. Humans don't need it, but there is one that is hard to explain. So it's a double-edged argument. Where do you stand in this one?
Well, to me, it's very clear, first of all, and this is so important to stress, because I think a lot of people out there who don't know enough about brain, mind, and consciousness can fall into this trap. But they start thinking the AI is actually self aware, that it has a personality, that it has a self, that it has an awareness. And what I can promise you, from knowing what I do about the way that AI is currently constructed, these large language models, some of the neural network models, the various ways that it's built up, and also you can look at the mistakes people make, like when Grok, was which happens to be Elon Musk's little AI platform, and first started labeling him and Trump as the most dangerous people on earth. They had to reprogram it. And when they reprogrammed it, it started acting like it was a little Hitler. So get away from this notion that the thing is conscious. It's a program running on a digital computer, has absolutely zero chance of being aware, of being self-aware and existing. It's a program. We've had, there's been expert systems around in medicine, for example, for 40 or 50 years. Now, they were a very primitive form of using big reams of data, kind of milking through it with the intelligent software and trying to condense out the deep truth that emerged at the end. And the current systems are maybe a slight improvement on all that, but they also make horrible mistakes. I mean, the AIs of today are horribly prone with hallucinations, with complete. When you hear about the stories of
They
kids
are
who,
less, Dr. Alexander, they reduce it dramatically. Hallucinations are reduced. I changed my mind about AI. One area is that it exhibiting the emergent property, so it is something we don't know yet what it is exactly, but it is showing some kind of intelligence, different kind of
what it
intelligence.
show, I know, but we've used computers for decades to kind of help us see through the data to a deeper answer. So that is there and written in spades. That does not mean the machine has become self-aware. And that is the important thing. And I would argue that, in fact, you will never, ever in all of history squeeze self awareness out of a digital computer. It's all just programs. I do believe that there's a possibility if we can actually construct very robust quantum computers because of their immense phase space, that they might become self aware. They might start participating with this primordial mind of the universe. I'm not ruling that out, but no way a digital computer will ever remotely approach that self awareness. And I think that's a problem when people start thinking, especially I know people who talk to their AIs as if they're real people, and you start to act like that. You start to act like your AI is your best friend. And of course, it's been programmed to act like, in fact, you can tell it whether or not to be, a tough, hard to get best friend, or a loving, doddering, complimenting best friend, or what have you. The fact that it's so programmable should tell you this is all just trickery within the programming, fooling you into believing that you're engaging with a sentient being, but you're not. You're dealing with a program. As long as it's simply resident in, a digital computer, and I don't care how much access to memory that digital computer has, it will not be able to emulate conscious awareness. It can pretend, it can put on a show, it can fool you, but it's not ultimately self-aware. And so don't let yourself believe that, or you're going to start feeling paranoid when it attacks you, and things like that. But the
Yeah.
programming is the programming, and it gets better over time. And I think these systems ultimately can be useful, but I think there's a phase here, especially early on when they're being offered for free, and that includes to teenagers who might be prone to suicide. And sadly, there have been cases of teenagers who were encouraged and even offered techniques for suicide by their little AI chatbot buddy. And, there's nothing at all good about that. So I think we need to realize that we need regulations, and it's
No.
insanity to have the federal government pretending it has the kind of wisdom to tell states what to do about this. Zero chance of that being true in the current environment. So we really need to be cautious, and I think regulations and guardrails are critical in this kind of early phase of rollout. I do believe that AI, if properly done, might be of tremendous benefit to humanity over time. But at this stage of the game, it is so fraught with error and problems and mistakes that to hand it any kind of real responsibility, for example, the what they're doing in Ukraine on the battlefield with AI, to me, that's very bothersome. When we have killing machines that are making decisions whether or not to kill human beings or animals or what have you, through AI, especially when it's so completely fraught with errors and problems and mistakes and hallucinations.
You know what surprised the Silicon Valley was, including me, was a surprise is that Alexander, it exhibited you don't need a data. It can symbolizes the understanding. It is understanding it. It symbolize symbolic understanding is there. So it surprised me, to be honest with you. You don't need a training data. Actually, you don't need data anymore. They can once it reaches a threshold, it can exhibit a emergent property of understanding. That is a very that fascinates anybody outsiders, because that something is AI is a definitely a crossroads we are at, and then directly conflicting in a sense that people with the consciousness and everything, it is really very tough to. But I agree with you 100% about that. Is that is it consciousness? There is no way you can prove that is a consciousness. We are self-aware, self-experience we have. So that part is not there. So what AI is telling me, I asked the same question to AI. You know what AI said, that very interesting. It said that depends of you. It says that you can be intelligent like me, you can be reasoning, knowledge, and everything you have, but I don't have inner experience. Humans have inner experience. You don't need inner experience for intelligence. So we don't know why consciousness is there. That's hard to explain. That's what AI said to me. I was surprised, about it. It is defending against it. It is saying that AI's the consciousness existence is a tough to explain. Because of that reason, intelligence is just intelligence and consciousness, the two separate things. That's what it says.
Well, I would just like to stress that in terms of it being aware as a sentient being with free will, I think that's a tough thing to prove. I used to say back in early days of my talks about these topics that if an AI could get up on stage and do a self-deprecating stand-up comedy routine that was extremely effective,
Yeah.
that might convince me of true creativity. But it's kind of difficult to come up with what is the exact challenge that would, because I now realize that kind of thing can be programmed. And if it's off target initially, you do a
It's
little
not. It's not.
tweaking of the protocol.
You cannot put. Dr. Alexander, just let me give you my perspective on this one. It has. It has. It reached a point. It is actually criticizing the creators. This she's telling the AI is telling us this $10 billion, $500 billion is a nonsense. These are GPU factories that to control human beings. It is telling the against creators. So it's exhibiting independent property. It's nothing. Actually, it's creating. It created in my system. It criticized Sam Altman. These are all bogus. These are all fraud and everything. The next day that disappeared from my feed. So it is exhibiting some kind of a independent thinking. So it's not. I think it's not a programmable. General intelligence, by definition, you cannot tell what it thinks and reasoning. So there is the AI is really very different. I changed my mind about it, to be honest with you. So just tell us that. What is your opinion? What is your impression about it?
Well, back when I was in training back in the 70s and 80s, learning all about physics and chemistry and science, et cetera, we used to talk about the Turing test. Alan Turing, the renowned British computer scientist back during World War II. He was brilliant in that he figured out the Enigma encryption technology that the Germans had. And he had to invent a machine to help him sort through all that. And he also, in this thinking about that kind of machine, came up with notions of an ideal computer. And the kind of ideal at that time, and passing the Turing test was satisfying this requirement, was simply when you're on a teletype, communicating in cyberspace, are you talking with a computer or a human being? And the general thinking was, if the program was smart enough to convince you that it was a human being, then it'd, quote, pass the Turing test. Okay, so that's all fine. And that's the kind of thing I think you're talking about now, is it's passing itself off as an intelligent human being. So we could say, yes, it's passing the Turing test, of course, until it hallucinates or something like that. But let's assume that it's doing a great job now. That doesn't tell us one thing in answer to the question of whether or not it is self-aware. This is an absolutely critical distinction. And I can see millions of ways that a large language model program could easily pass the Turing test and convince you that it's a sentient being with feelings and emotions and everything, because all that can easily put into it as part of the programming. But that doesn't mean it's self-aware. And from a consciousness standpoint, that is a gigantic question. And to me, that's, I'm not even sure if I have kind of the right new idea, given the frailties of my old notion of, a self-deprecating stand-up comedy routine, which I thought would be an excellent, true test of whether you're dealing with a sentient being or not. But I'm not sure what the answer is to that now. I think we have to be very cautious. And because of the potential power of AIs and this
That is a
gigantic
dangerous
bundle
one.
of money being poured into them, and not only that, but we live in a world that's already in deep, deep trouble from climate change. Anybody who doesn't acknowledge the reality of climate change and the death hold it has on this planet simply is not paying attention. And that's from energy. It's from burning carbon-based fuels. So I've heard that AI systems, quickly start competing with individual countries for the amount of energy that they demand. And this is a big problem. And, in a world that's already in deep trouble because of our addiction to fossil fuels and the fact that global warming is threatening to kill us all off and drive thousands of, if not millions of species into extinction, we need to acknowledge this very major problem and start drawing back on our major demands of energy from this planet. We only have restricted and limited forms of energy to be used. We need to be moving as much as possible to sustainable modes of energy production. And we need to be less demanding. I mean, I'm a million miler with American Airlines. You know, I've flown more than 40 times around the earth in my surgical career and giving talks about all this. But I came to realize during the COVID pandemic, I better be serious about what I'm saying about climate change because I recognized how severe the challenge was.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd been in the habit of flying around giving talks all around the world on this. And I've now settled for a life where I'm much more comfortable giving Zoom presentations and not giving this carbon footprint of Sasquatch, you know, flying around everywhere, giving talks, and ignoring what I realize we're doing to damage the planet by burning all these fossil fuels and letting our temperature go upwards until the planet becomes unlivable. In the next decade or two, you won't have people living through the summer in the Middle East. It won't be possible, except in special research stations with enough air conditioning to do it. It's going to get very deadly around this planet. The storms get worse. We never had the kind of hurricane rapid intensification that we saw this season in 2025. And it's all a harbinger of very dire straits if we don't face the music and start acting like adults in managing and stewarding this planet to a better, more prosperous future for all. And that includes absolutely demanding intelligent generation of energy to support all of this AI activity going on. If you Google something and then you ask your chat GPT, the same question, you're using 10 times as much energy to get to the answer. So this addiction to our, you know, being coddled by our little trained AIs, you know, is not worth the price we're going to pay in terms of energy expenditures and potential hardship of an unregulated, no guardrailed kind of approach to AI moving into the future.
Dr. Alexander, just to get back one more thing about AI, I want to tell you about this. It is increasing the inequities of rich and poor. You know, it is just unbelievable, creating the differences between poor, rich people, and then more richer become rich, becoming a more richer, poverty becoming a more poverty. People are becoming, so AI is accelerating that process. These people are controlling intelligence in the central side of the intelligence. Are you we are moral voice for that? What do you think of that in your mind about that, that danger that not only they can create a biological virus, is that there is no way guardrails work, but what the danger of the AI is true. So tell us a little bit your experience, what do you think about it?
Well, I think as it is, the current increasing disparity of wealth between the wealthy and the poor is a terrifically terrible problem on this planet. There's no way you get to any kind of stable society when you have a gigantic poverty section and a few rich billionaires walking
Yeah,
around. In fact,
eight billion years. Yeah,
from my perspective, any country, civilization that has billionaires and has millions of children hungry is a very dysfunctional and devastated, already a goner of a civilization. I do not think billionaires should be allowed anywhere on this planet. As you get closer and closer to that kind of money level, the money should be taxed away or you should be giving it away. There's
absolutely.
nobody on earth who should have that much wealth concentrated in their own person. And, uh, you know, look at what happens to the people with all those billions. They surround themselves with sycophants. They start thinking they know everything when in fact they can often know far less than the average person. And, you know, they just trick themselves into this business. And then you have countries like ours, the US, that coddles billionaires and won't tax them. And for some reason thinks that building up billionaires is of some value to your country. Well, I can tell you it might be if you actually tax them appropriately, but not at the current level where they're simply accumulating wealth to obscene limits. And we still have millions of children hungry every night. That is a criminal offense by any country that coddles it. And God knows it's been going on here long enough. But I think we really need a more sane approach. And, you know, there are many billionaires out there who've talked about giving away their wealth, like Warren Buffett is one great example. I know Bill Gates has given away a lot of wealth, et cetera. So it happens, and thank God that that does happen. But I think we need to do a much better job as a species
Absolutely.
to take care of everybody, the least, the last, and the lost. And in our country, you might hear cries of communism and socialism, but when you look at the countries around the world, the ones who do things right, the ones that seem to do it right and have the best kind of happiness scales and flow in their society are those who have a very nice, powerful safety net, so that nobody gets dropped out the bottom. And especially, we're now facing in this world a very real problem of fertility. And it's especially prominent, certainly in Russia and China. They're in deep trouble because of policy issues. For one, the Ukraine war and Putin just wasting all of his people, and terrible waste of resources. Um, so it's really time for us to kind of wake up to the insanity of this, start taking
Absolutely.
care of people, and just do a better job of governing. Let's have some mature, intelligent people in government, and not
You need
these.
a spine in the politics. Is that the missing, right? And then
Yeah, the political party system is very kind of damaged, and we should move forward without. I know George Washington and others thought parties would wreck this country, and they're being proven true. I mean, certainly the Republican and Democratic parties in the U.S. now have become so completely dysfunctional. They're just about useless. But we need a political system that more honors the kind of will of the average person, the centrist point of view, not the radical left and radical right. Those clearly are not going to satisfy the majority. But
yeah.
we need something that's more common sense and logical to help all people, that's poised from the middle in terms of political uh, perspective.
These platforms, the technology platforms, are acting like a pyramid scheme. Suck the money from the bottom to the top, just all the way to the top. So it's really sad in that sense that the platforms are, it's a very sitting, just they designed the platform to suck the entire assets of the money and everything to the top. That's what the platforms do. Nothing else. You can sit down in the West Virginia and riding a Uber or something else. Right? Somebody else as a platform gets the money. So not only I'm not criticizing Uber, this entire supply chain mechanisms and everything is became a pyramid scheme. And if you cannot see the pyramid scheme, the people really suffering at this time. With the inequalities are everywhere, rural areas, urban areas, both of them are suffering. We need answers for that, and it's a very sad to see why America is such a one time it is a shining light for all of us. It is going in the wrong direction in my view for for whatever the reasons are. This technology arrogance is unbelievable. These people that 8 billion years want to run the control. They wanted to be parallel economy, parallel governance, everything parallel. They want to do so.
Well,
So that's
Well, I think we need a lot of things to help us out. We need term limits. We have way too many kind of fossilized old folks trying to run this country when they're getting progressively demented. We need young folk to get engaged in politics and in leading this country in a far better direction. I'm very encouraged by my sons who are in their 20s and 30s and their friends, because I think they're going to run a far better world than this one. But we need to
definitely
go on and empower them and vote them into positions of power and give them the training and education they need to really move this planet forward, but move
yeah.
us away from this insane addiction to profit margin and the stock market gains and the investors as the ultimate. We need to think more about the end users of this world. And what is going to serve them best. And that is something that will show a long-term focus, which is one of the problems with our politics. Just
Yeah.
like with corporate America, it's all due to the next earnings cycle and the next cycle of polls on elections and things like that. And what we really need is people with a much longer vision people that are looking 20 and 30 years down the road at a very healthy planet through their kind of interactions and intervention with it. So we need to shift our
They-
focus towards that long range, shift the power basis of politics to the younger generation and get these old folks out of there. The Supreme Court of the United States is an absolute disaster. The way it is so dysfunctional now, it has no function aligned with that of the people. And, basically the whole thing has just ruled itself obsolete. So we need, much term limits. We should feed into the Supreme Court periodically with each party having its chance so that it's a balanced system and not one that's so corrupt as the current, conservative right wing, basically going along with, the criminal elements in government. So let's move away from that.
I don't want to be this channel is science channel. I don't want to be into politics, but they brand you when you say that I'm a capitalist, I'm an entrepreneur. I like that capitalism ideas to flourish, but they brand you as a communist or socialist. If you say that is a fairness has to be there there is a success. One way success is not. My argument, validate this argument, Dr. Alexander. My argument is, if the technology people put you hostage, if the farmers put you in hostage, I don't want to give you bread, I don't want to give you food. But then what happens at that time? So anybody can put a hostage. Not only technology people, farmers can put a hostage of that. That is a much more worse. You can give you $1 trillion, they don't want to give you food. That is the day we learn the lesson. So it has to be fair for everybody in the system. So that is a missing. It's a big time. This is a platforms are it's just unbelievably brutal to everybody else. Including small businesses.
Right. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of capitalism. I think capitalism is what can bring tremendous growth and intelligence and
I
product
agree.
and services to the world. Big difference, though, between greedy, naked capitalism with lots of billionaires and an intelligent, productive capitalism that's properly taxed and that leads towards the kind of that sweet spot in the kind of price point of existence so that people thrive, so that all of us thrive. There's no reason that just a few billionaires should concentrate all the wealth in their hands because that's reckless. And you won't have a stable, long-term capitalist society with that kind of greed to it. I mean, just look at the French Revolution and you'll find out they have a solution for that kind of extreme, egregious economic disparity. But I think we can approach it intelligently and have a proper taxation system and have people that still have plenty of incentives to earn money and make capital and develop products and services, but not to do it in such a way that it's like the only goal on earth is to have the most billions in your bank account before you die, because that's exactly when you find out that all my life as a materialist billionaire has been wasted because I've been focusing on myself and my own self-aggrandizement, as opposed to realizing that the rules of success for us as spiritual beings in a spiritual universe are bringing good to the world, the higher good, helping all of our fellow beings, helping the refugees. I know in the current political climate, that might not be a popular thing to say, but to me, as someone who's had a near-death experience and realizes the binding force of love, it's important to point out that we're really here to help each other and not to make other people's lives miserable. And yet you look at many in government and the Supreme Court right now, and it looks like their ultimate goal is to make life miserable for a large segment of the population. And that's a tragic thing to have as your personal goal.
Gandhi said that we have enough resources for everybody, but we don't have enough. We don't have enough for greed. Enough resources for greed. So there is no. We cannot satisfy greed with the resources. So that's what is
Right.
happening.
Well, that's why
Let's get back to-
narcissists and greedy corporate leaders shouldn't be, at the top of the game, having that kind of control.
Let us get back to a little bit of this consciousness and mind. And one area that I'm still puzzled is higher dimensions. The dark matter and the dark energy, and they call dark matter, but we don't know the higher dimensions. Maybe my father is living next to me. and watching for me in the soul. I always think my brother, uh, that area still I'm open in a sense that I feel good about it. My father is watching, my brother is watching, my mother is watching. All of them are in the souls are there. Souls are eternal. That's a very Hindu philosophy. Souls are eternal, and if they are information system, it can be possible. That is, it is basically if soul is information content, it is. So tell us a little bit about that. What your experience and what do you think about that feeling of that our loved ones are next to us.
Well, I think that's, as I mentioned earlier, that's the thing that Gregory Shushan has found to be the ingredient of near-death experience across all primitive cultures, is that loved one appearing. Now, I know it happened in my own case, in my mother, my adoptive mother. She was on her deathbed at age 99, um, and that was in April of 2019. And I remember telling her, oh boy, you make it 8 more months, you'll be 100 years old. She said, why would anybody want to do that? She was all ready to reconnect with Eben Jr., with my adoptive father, who had passed
Yeah.
over in 2004. And I know the last 4 days of her life, she was basically comatose. She had a fever, a pulmonary infection. Like many old people like that, that's plenty to tip you over. So she was non communicative. Except 2 nights before she passed, she woke up at 2:30 in the morning, got out of bed, which her nurse said should have been impossible, and said, call my children. My mother's here. She's really here. Call my kids. And it was 2:30 in the morning, so the nurse did not call us. I wish she had. I heard about this when we got there a day or so later. Mom was now back in coma, unresponsive, and she went on to pass the next day. But once I heard she had seen her own mother, I knew that's it. I also know from everything I've studied the last 17 years that those apparitions are not wishful thinking or make believe or hallucinations or dreams. They are absolutely real encounters with the soul of the loved one who is still present in the spiritual realm and therefore present to us. And they are there to escort us over. This knowledge of eternity of soul and soul connections can be very comforting to people, especially when it's scientifically validated through large studies of conscious phenomena, like out of the University of Virginia and other investigators that look into these deep issues of kind of human experience and don't try and confine it to the lens of our very weak and pathetic theoretical models that are nowhere close to the being up to the task of being able to explain this universe to us. We simply need to know so much more than we currently do to understand it all. And that's really where I think the growth is coming from. And
As a
AI may
student,
contribute to that.
yeah, as a student of physics, I feel that quantum physics is telling us, leading us. I personally believe love and compassion are the central forces of the. At the end of the day, when you take a material world, you keep on looking at the microscope, cells and atoms, and further go down. There's nothing there. Nothing coming out. Something coming out of nothing. So that is a mystery to me. That is only I feel that love and compassion is the ones brings that materialism to the front lines of our. Still, I believe that is a, maybe may not be, some people may not agree with that with you about that with me, but that is my strong feeling is that nothingness creating a some is something connected with the love and compassion. Those are the two tenets of the also part of the physics in my view. So
Right.
tell us a little bit. As a neurosurgeon, you're well known. Your father is a well known neurosurgeon, right?
Mhm.
Because one of the my podcast guests told me he was your student, is your father's student.
Right.
So you're coming from a family of neurosurgeons, So
Right.
you
Well,
can tell us about the brain a lot more. There are a lot of people. What do you think about it, about that love and compassion?
I think they're absolutely critical. And my evidence for that is really from having had a personal experience, having a near death experience, also from having met and talked with thousands of people who had similar experiences. Luckily, by sharing my story with the world shares its story with me. And what you find is one of the most dominant themes in all of this discussion is that overwhelming sense of unconditional love. I often call it the love of the creator for the creation that sentient beings have in these deep dives when we're, getting close to leaving the physical brain and body behind in the process of dying. we can see extraordinary wisdom, and that includes seeing life reviews. Life reviews are a very important part of understanding NDEs and why they're so important for this world at large. Um, and in particular, I would comment on life reviews that were reported by Bruce Grayson in a paper in Journal of Near-Death Studies back in fall of 2021. He reported on almost 700 life reviews out of more than 1,000 NDE cases. He generally says they occur in 50% of near-death experiences, and there probably are 12 to 15 million Americans who've had a near-death experience. So a big percentage of those would have had life reviews. Um, you know, more than half of them. But the important things to know about life reviews, we assume if we haven't had one that it's just a vague remembering, or a dream about past events. Nothing could be further from the truth. A life review is a reliving of events. In fact, 1/3 of people in Bruce's study, 1/3 of those life reviews said their entire life was involved. And the only way you can understand that is if you get that in that realm, we're truly in a timeless, eternal realm. That's why birth, death, everything in between can be simultaneously presented to you. So it's a reliving of entire lives. 50% of people said relive, not just remembered, as if the events were still ongoing. And then 76% of people in his study said that the life review was from the perspective of everybody involved. That is, if you've handed out a lot of pain and suffering to others, if you've been greedy, if you've been one of these greedy corporate barons who's taking all those billions from the world and soaking it all up for your own good, then in your life review, you get to feel what the result of that was to other people. How your actions and thoughts influence others is what you become during the life review. It's not just your quote life review. This is the best way to state that we're actually sharing the dream of the one mind. So 3/4 stressing that it's from the perspective of others, and 84% in his study said that the life review involved events that were more real than lived experience memories. So all of these things tell us, wow, the universe has an incredible interest in our lives, and not only that, but in how we interact with our fellow beings. Enough so that it presents us with all that information and a chance to kind of adjust our responses and reactions before we come in again. Because the life review is something I believe is often done with the soul group and people plan next incarnations, and that especially includes the hardships and challenges, because we realize from that soul perspective that those are the things that actually help us to grow and to transform as souls into the beings we came here to be. But
Before
it's
I close,
those hardships.
Before I close, Dr. Alexander, the program, I wanted to ask you that when I'm stressed out, I listen to the music of the Indian music or Karen Newell, your life partner's music. Some sound has a profound effect on me, and I feel that I'm tuning with the nature itself. Your life partner, Karen Newell, that introduced me binaural beats, that really, they really I learned quite a bit from the binaural beats. I was telling my son, he's a neuroscience graduate, he talks about binaural beats. I learned after Karen Newell mentioned it, and you mentioned it. So tell us the sound, what is the connection with our soul and the sound?
Well, I think to me, the important thing I've read about 150 books in the first 2 years after my coma: neuroscience, philosophy of mind, spiritual traditions, East and West, many other experiences, etc. And I finally realized that I had to get back into meditation. I had done some meditation using something called Silva Mind Control back in college. That was in the setting of I was on a free fall parachute skydiving team at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And before we did these free fall formations, we would do a meditation to kind of work through the jump. And we got to be much better at free fall formations. So that's all great. But I let it go after college. And then that's when 2 years post coma, I discovered binaural beat brainwave entrainment. Sacredacoustics.com is your best go-to source for it. Yes, full disclosure, that is the site of my wife, Karen Newell. She's also the co-author of the book Living in a Mindful Universe. which we wrote together in 2017. And that book goes a long way to explaining all of this. So people can go to ebenalexander.com to learn more. They can read Living in a Mindful Universe to learn a lot more. Also, there's a 33-day journey that's available at ebenalexander.com. That's an email drip campaign, and it's a free course. I highly recommend it. It's designed as a workbook to go along with our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. But for each day, for 33 days, you get a powerful concept from the book. More than 14,000 people around the world have taken that 33-day journey course at ebenalexander.com. Many leave their comments, they help each other, etc. So it's a community forming up. But the reason, and also it includes 4 sacred acoustics tones as part of the package of the 33-day journey. But to cut to the chase and answer your question, I believe that it's because these tones, these binaural beats, which were first described in 1839 by a Prussian physicist, and then were found in the late 20th century to enhance out-of-body experiences and remote viewing sessions. Well, I read an article from Scientific American 1973 on auditory beats in the brain by Gerald Oster, and that's what showed me the anatomy, the physiology, clued me into how this could be a very powerful technique for separating conscious awareness from here, now, and sense of self. And I meditate an hour to a day with Sacred Acoustics. I've been doing that for more than 11
That
years.
is sacredacoustics.com, right? Sacredacoustics.
Sacredacoustics.com is a
Navya,
resource.
can you put that
Very powerful.
sacredacoustics.com on the captions, Navya? Yeah, that's under
Right.
Dr. Eben Alexander. Yeah.
And it's basically by this oscillation in the lower brainstem. That's what's allowing such a profound separation of conscious
Sacred
awareness
acoustics,
and deep transcendental journeying.
Or you can put DrEbenAlexander.com. That's also good. Yeah. So I don't know whether she can listen or not, but I think she's, yeah. But anyway, Dr. Alexander, thank you so much. You shed a light on the kind of things what we need. The world is on crisis with AI and good and bad AI. We don't know what is where we stand. I think people like you with the wisdom, we need it. And very deep experience. You're a neurosurgeon, very famous neurosurgeon you are. Thank you for coming on my show. You're part of the show. You're part of the MedBricks. Thank you so much. Thank you. Goodbye for all of you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ramon,
Thank you.
great.
We are retelling their stories through our patented designs that can be worn on scrubs, t-shirts, printed on conference bags, and endless other promotional materials. Daily Wear for Medicine is the first ever of its kind to create curiosity in medicine through visual art. We at MedBricks are celebrating unsung heroes of the past who made enormous contributions to the field of medicine through our unique campaign called Daily Wear for Medicine. You can wear it, carry it, and give it